And we are back live, Hockey Discussions live here, going through the team-by-team recap. Here we have Team Colt with us today to walk through his selections live in the studio, who he selected, why, and how he's feeling heading into the new year. Team Colt, welcome to the studio, and thanks for joining us.
Hello. How are we doing tonight?
We are doing great. Thank you for being here. We want to go through your selections. To everybody joining us, Team Colts keepers this season heading into the year, we have Jack Eichel, Quinn Hughes, Connor McDavid, Sam Reinhart, and Zach Werenski. Colt, tell us about your keepers heading into the year. Why did you keep who you kept?
So first round I went with William Nylander, and I went for this because I have a solid D core. Two of the five of my keepers for this year were defensemen, and that would be Quinn Hughes and Zach Werenski. So I'm feeling pretty good about them, and rather than going for a defenseman first overall, I went for William Nylander.
That's nice. And it seemed like you were one of the only teams who kept a fair amount of defensemen, so you had the market pretty cornered. After William Nylander, you moved into Sidney Crosby, followed by Mark Scheifele. Tell us about those two picks. Crosby's someone you had last year, right?
Yes. And last year, I would say that Crosby did go a little early too. But during the call, while we were making our picks, the name Crosby had came out a little early. And I definitely was getting nervous with the mention of Crosby so early in the draft. So rather than not take any chances, I just picked him up real quick.
I think that's something to a lot of people. You have to realize you have to adapt to people talking about certain players and potentially picking them up. So Crosby going there makes sense. He put out good output. He had 430 fantasy points last year, 33 goals and 58 assists. He averaged just a little over 5 points a game, so pretty good fantasy player there to go in the early rounds. I thought it was a little early, but like we said, it's because there's a lot of reference to the player. Get your guy when you can get him, is what they say. We then moved into Alex Ovechkin. So tell us about that. You picked up OV. He had a phenomenal fantasy year last year, obviously breaking the goal record with Wayne Gretzky. So tell us about that selection.
Yeah, so with the OV pick, this was kind of out on a whim. I have this feeling that just maybe the Capitals might be able to get to the playoffs again. They might have a phenomenal season. Tom Wilson, Dylan Strome, Alex Ovechkin, these guys are all core players of that team. And I think they'll be able to have a good season regardless of making the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And I think Ovi's good because he has the hit peripherals. He shoots the puck. Even though if Ovi kind of slams the brakes this year, I think he's still good for 25-plus goals. So Ovechkin's good pickup. I thought he went fairly good in the 9th round for us. That made sense. And then we move down the list. We get into Clayton Keller, and then you pick up your first defenseman outside your keepers in Adam Fox. Tell us about that selection with Adam Fox. So he's on the Rangers. You select him in the 11th round. What are you looking for out of Fox?
So Fox, every time I played him last year, it just seemed like he was racking up points. I don't know why. I'm not a big Rangers fan or an Adam Fox fan, but every time I played him last year, he was putting a beating on me.
Yeah. Yeah, and Fox, I think, is an interesting one because the Rangers should have a bounce back this year, so I'm expecting them to at least get the power play back in motion, and Fox will obviously be the point man on that power play, so will be a good pickup. And then this is where we start the D market kind of start to fall apart. Not many Ds were left at this point. Everyone was scooping them up, so at that point, you picked up Mikhail Sergachev of Utah, which is a great selection in the 12th round. What are you looking for in Sergachev?
Sergachev, I think he's young. He's got a lot of potential. I think his last season was pretty good. And I think it can only get better.
Yeah, Sergachev, 320 fantasy points last year. That's a good season for a defenseman. Like I said, there's a big drop-off outside of the top D where it goes from 300, low 300s, down to 200s. Then we moved down. You picked up Kirill Marchenko from Columbus. Really liked that pick in round 13. And then you picked up one of the, what I think, best defensemen in the NHL, Lane Hutson here in Montreal. What do you like about Hudson's game?
What I like about Lane Hutson is that he went unnoticed to me for about half the season last year. And it wasn't until he started heating up that he really brought my attention to him. And I know you liked him a lot and had spoken very highly of him, so that was definitely on my mind. And as, like you said, the D were dwindling, there were only so many options to take from, so I went with Lane Hutson.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And Hudson, I think, is good for 70 assists this year. He had 60 last year in his rookie season. I think the ceiling's the limit, and I think Montreal is going to progress this year too, so I like that. We then had Nikolai Ehlers for Carolina, Adrian Kempe in LA, Seth Jones in Florida, followed by Wyatt Johnson in round 18. Any of those names there you want to talk to and why you selected them?
No, I think Ehlers in Carolina is going to be great. Kempe is going to be Kempe. Seth Jones I picked only because I have high hopes for him being on Florida. Maybe playing with better players, he'll be able to step into himself more and be himself and do what he wants to do out there.
Definitely. And then you had the Wyatt Johnson. Then interesting pick here. This is one I'm sure you'll have a lot to talk about here with Mason Marchman at pick 19. How did that happen?
So, in all honesty, this one we did 90 seconds per round. So that time went by really quick, and in the last 10 seconds, I still didn't have an answer. So I kind of accepted it was going to be a random pick, and I would say that was probably my least favorite pick out of everyone.
And just with Mason Marchman, and then I think you dropped him, right? And you dropped him shortly after and re-picked Patrick Laine, which was a good pickup to play with Lane Hudson. Then we moved down. You started to move into the goaltending categories here. First goaltender you picked was Adin Hill for Vegas. That's a good pickup. I think Vegas is going to have a good year this year.
I agree with that, especially with the pickup of Mitch Marner. These guys are hungry for another cup.
Yep.
They want it, and it definitely shows, I think, and I'm excited for this season. So not only do I like Vegas, but I really like Adin Hill too. I thought he was a phenomenal goaltender last year, and he definitely got me some good points.
Yeah, and Adin Hill had 50 starts. I'm expecting him to get a bit more now that Ilya Samsonov's out of the picture. Adin Hill should be a true number one for Vegas. We moved down a couple more notable picks. Jacob Trouba from Anaheim in round 21, a great peripheral guy. He's going to get 200 blocks, potentially 200 hits. Sergei Bobrovsky from Florida, he fell all the way to round 22, but you can't be mad to pick up a Stanley Cup champion that late, followed by Carter Verhaeghe and then Rickard Rakell. Any of those picks that you were surprised you got this late, or you thought they all went in a good round?
To be honest with you, I am pretty surprised that Bobrovsky and Verhaeghe were this late. At least I feel like Verhaeghe might have went a little earlier. But Pt.2, I'm really happy I got, because last year I feel like he was an underrated player, and the only thing he was missing last year was that he just couldn't score.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Trouba, had 1 goal, 13 assists last season, so nothing too impressive with Trouba, but then you go to his peripherals, and that's where he really opens up. I mean, he had 44 penalty minutes, handful of blocks, handful of hits, so Trouba's going to get you those aspects fairly well. So he was averaging close to 4 points a game, so pretty solid defenseman there. We then move out to round out the last couple picks. We had Robert Thomas, Darcy Kempfer, your last goaltender you selected there with L.A., Dylan Strome for Washington, who you mentioned you're really high on playing with Ovechkin. Then Mason McTavish and Jackson Lacombe. Those two picks I really like. I'm high on Anaheim this year, so I think those two rookies will do good. Lacombe's going to take a step forward. He had 75 games played last year, 280 points. I'm expecting him to get closer to 330 fantasy points this year. And then we're rounding out the final two picks, which I think are two steals, and I want to hear your opinion on these. Nico Hischier and Dmitry Voronkov from Columbus. Were you shocked you got Hischier this late in the draft?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he was one of my favorites last year. So what do you think about these Anaheim picks? Were you excited when you saw these guys available?
Definitely. So last year, I was never a fan of Anaheim, but when they traded Trouba, all of a sudden I started watching them and kind of getting to know the players, and I do think they have a lot of potential this year. I'm definitely excited for McTavish and Lacombe. I think they're two young guys that have just endless potential in this game, so I'm very excited for that.
I think so too. So let's zoom out from your team briefly with our last couple questions. Looking around the league, what was one of the most shocking things you saw across each team, maybe in the draft? What's something notable that maybe our listeners should be aware of that you learned from the draft this year?
Me personally, I would feel like maybe goalies should go a little later in the draft. I think some people rushed to pick up goalies in the beginning of the draft, which costed them good players that they probably needed. So that might be my best piece of advice I could give you. It depends what your league is and how the points work, but goalies aren't particularly favored in our league.
Yeah, no, not a ton. I mean, they'll get you points, but I think goalies are so unpredictable. So you and I both worked the waiver wire fairly good last year, where we'd just pick up guys who are hot and cold and be okay dropping people. Because the problem is, in some situations, even myself included, I pick Vasilevsky up so early. If he has a bad year, I'm potentially dropping someone I drafted in round 9. So same with Brown, with Jake Ottinger in round 9, and then Gary in round 10 picked up Shesterkin. So we all have draft capital and goalies that we got pretty high, and we'll have to drop them if they start to slow down. I like the point you made about adapting your draft strategy. Is D went pretty quick in this draft. And then you also were getting your guy. You know, you had Crosby Ville in round 7. You were nervous he was going to get taken, and you took him. And I'm sure he's going to have a great year this year. So any closing remarks heading into the year? Any other points you'd like to leave us with? Or are you feeling confident with the team?
I'm feeling pretty good. I like my picks this year. I think I'm off to a great start, a lot better than last year. And I think everyone else looks pretty good, too. I'm excited to see how this plays out, and I wish everyone the best of luck.
Awesome. All right, well, that was Team Colt joining us to walk through his team heading into the 2025-2026 season. Thank you all for listening. Up next, we'll discuss Team Brown. Take care.